You are now listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with your host, Jorge Valenzuela.
This is education coach Jorge Valenzuela. Welcome to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast, where I provide all educators, whether instructional leaders or teachers, tips on how to be their best both personally and professionally. Now let's get into it. We're here today with the one and only Coach Victor Hicks. Victor is a very well-known teacher, education consultant, and speaker. I'm happy to have him on the show because I happen to be a very big fan, and he's also a close friend of mine. How are you?
I'm good, brother. Good to be here as always, in good company. Always love checking in, let our community know what we've been up to lately.
For all the folks listening, you already know Victor is my guy. He's one of my good friends. He's been on the show plenty of times, and we always kick it. No need for introductions in that way. Victor, please give us your backstory. How did you get into education? And what steps did you take to get where you are now in 2024 as an education coach and consultant?
I came from a background of educators. My mom was an educator of many years. My aunts, my uncles married teachers. So it was always kind of in the past, something I always knew I wanted to do. So as soon as I was old enough, I started working in some day camps here in Chicago, which is my hometown. Went on to school, majored in education, actually majored in physical education. So thought kind of where the Coach Hicks comes from.
That's where it's from. I didn't know that.
That's actually that and the step team. So those were taking place concurrently. So that's kind of where Coach Hicks was born. I would say about 8 years ago. No, it's been 9 years now. Was teaching in Chicago, wanted to make a move to Atlanta, and a computer science teacher position opened up in Atlanta. I was always a pretty tech savvy teacher, and then I said, well, how hard could it be teaching kindergarten computer science, right? How much could they possibly be doing? However, we think that definitely opened the door to really, I would say probably the most fulfilling part of my education journey. I think computer science really has allowed me to see how doors can be opened up for students when you give them that access. And then 2020, right after the pandemic, that was the soft start of Coding with Culture. We gave a couple camps. We had some parents that asked, because their kids, we really were getting great engagement, students signing in. So parents asked, will we be willing to, work with the kids over spring break? And from there, 2022 went full time. And here we are, still building the plane while we're flying it. But it's been a good fight. And like I said, definitely one of the more fulfilling. I think this because it definitely comes hand in hand with equity and talking about making sure that we get kids the opportunities that they need to be successful. Two issues that were already close to my heart. And I think computer science just really put the purpose behind the work.
Victor, I got to tell you, last time you were on the show, well, not the last time, but the first time, you said, I'm building the plane as I fly it. I have to admit, I made that one of my slides. I did put Hicks 2023 on it, so you did get credit for it. But I've realized that as an entrepreneur, I'm always going to be building the plane as I fly it. I'm never going to be comfortable. The great thing is this, when you do something well, you do build confidence. I like to say that I build self-efficacy for certain things, but after doing so many things well, now I have overall confidence. Have you found the same thing, man?
Absolutely. I think one of the things when you realize that, well, two things. I'll say when you do things well and when you do things well with purpose. So I think for me, the more that I got because again, I had no idea, even when I gave the first computer science camp, even when I went to business for myself, that I will be speaking at some of the conferences that I am now, or just being provided with some of the opportunities that this has led. But I think it definitely is a confidence booster. I think it also allows you, I think, confirmation that you're walking in your purpose. Because again, this wasn't something that I necessarily went out and said, hey, let me be the next speaker or feature or anything like that. But when it happens, I think it's more of that, like, okay, I'm doing the work I'm supposed to be doing. Because if this is happening, it's clearly the universe, it's clearly the forces are moving in the direction. So again, even if I'm not necessarily seeing the long-term purpose in this or seeing the why, right? I think those things and the fact they continue to happen and they continue to come, it lets you know that, number one, that you can do it, I think, which is important, but also that you should be, and that there's somebody or something or some opportunity that needs exactly what you have to offer in that space.
I remember meeting you and speaking with you, and we became friends. I really didn't know you were going to end up being the speaker you are now. I remember the first time I heard you speak, I think Yaritza or Fonz Mendoza had you on a podcast or had you on something. You were with other people. It was a panel. When you see a bunch of people, but then one stands out and you're like, man, that person's going to be a star one day. The second time I felt that way about you was at ISTE. I saw your presentation virtually. I didn't have a chance to be there in person because I think we had a conflict, but I went and watched it. And just the way you opened up, the way you interacted, and the way you spoke, I do believe that you have a very big future.
Thank you.
It just makes me happy to see everything you're doing now, but I know you're just starting, even though you're not just starting, but I think you're just starting.
Yeah, that growth is, I think, is one of the things I'm most grateful for, because everything comes in. Speaking of things that our friendship has brought as far as golden nuggets, I think that's one of the major ones, is that the process is just that. It happens for a reason, the time that it happens for a reason. And I think very early on, just being transparent, it is easy as an entrepreneur to get frustrated. I know I've definitely had those moments where I'm like, am I doing this for the right reasons? When it gets slow or things aren't picking up, and then you realize that there was, I think the phrase is something like delay, not denial. But when you look at the process, I think it's as cliche as it is with computer science, why we teach kids that what we teach is important, because it's not necessarily the product. Yes, it's great to get to this wonderful end result, but what did you learn from what happened, how it happened, when it didn't happen, who it happened to or with? So again, it's easy. I think sometimes they say hindsight is 20/20, but I know for sure that there were things that I would have jumped, or opportunities that I thought, oh my goodness, this is the worst thing, this didn't happen. But 2 years down the road, I realized that now, okay, I'm much better equipped to do, or even just have a platform to affect, or to impact people in a way that's the most purposeful. It's hard sometimes going through it, but I think most of life lessons that are worth learning or living are.
Have you ever felt like there's a certain topic that you feel like, I got this topic, I know what I'm doing with it, I understand it, but then you turn around and hear somebody else? For example, I was doing a panel yesterday and I heard the superintendent speak, and I realized as she was speaking and she was breaking down her slide deck and her presentation, although I understood a lot in this topic, there's some things and some intricacies that she has that I don't have. Now she's added to me. Have you had a moment like that?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely one of the great parts about speaking at some of these conferences is that you also attend them. I'm a firm believer in learning your craft and really seeing, again, just best practices and what different ways people present similar information. Oh yeah, I think those are the best learning opportunities when you see, especially when you think things like ISTE, like, well, that has to get kind of tired of just talking about ed tech. But I think even if you take a topic like, to your point about things that we're used to, so I would say I'm a pretty aficionado on creating lessons for K-5 in the computer science space, right? Even in those areas where I have expertise, going to hear someone else's perspective, going to see how someone else looks at solving a problem or looks at just approaching a topic on various things. I think it adds to your toolbox. So I find that most conferences that I go to, that's just kind of how it moves. You as much as you give, there are so many different ways to look at, again, the same topics, but even topics we didn't realize were issues.
If you're watching this on YouTube or listening on Spotify or iTunes, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button and share this episode with your family, friends, and colleagues who are interested in self-improvement through lifelong learning. And now for a word from one of our sponsors.
Education is changing. Classrooms look different, and the future demands that our students be equipped for whatever comes their way. Educators play a huge role in helping prepare students for their futures. Defined Learning is a K-12 standards-aligned PBL solution that provides high-quality cross-curricular performance tasks across content areas such as ELA, math, science, social studies, computer science, and more. The hands-on projects are based on real-world situations and allow students to apply their learning. Education is changing. Give students the tools and experiences to recognize their futures and make an incredible impact on the world. Defined, the authority on applied learning.
We had the pleasure of listening to George this morning on project-based learning, and he shared his story that his aunt encouraged him to go into education. And she was absolutely right. He is so talented at sharing information in a way that is easy to digest and is inspiring to go back and actually implement and make change.
So my takeaway is that Mr. Valenzuela was very inspiring. He was very motivational and helped me to think about a new way of getting my teachers excited.
When I set out to do a workshop, my key deliverable is energy. And this momentum is used to make connections, inspire, educate, and ultimately transform the audience, so that they're compelled to take that same energy back to their schools and communities. And although we have fun, we tackle the hard topics of today, like educational policy, pedagogy for improving curriculum and instruction, and empowering today's students by connecting our work to the needs of the workforce. So please consider Lifelong Learning Defined for your next keynote, workshop, or conference, and overall instructional and educational coaching needs. My name is George, and I hope to connect with you soon.
We would love to have him come and do some work with us and help us be a little more successful and help our students to be more successful.
I move around a lot of schools, and we're seeing a huge disconnect. A lot of teachers that have come from non-traditional pathways, especially in the past few years. And so just interactions, expectations is really the first step. All of my teachers, raise your right hand, and please repeat after me. I promise that I will speak positivity into my students. All of my administrators, all my directors, all my principals, all my coordinators, raise your hands, please, your right hand, and repeat after me. I promise that I will speak positivity into my faculty and staff. Thank you. Victor, as a teacher or education consultant, what is one obstacle that you face and how did you overcome it?
Getting my foot in the door. The education conference world is it's a tight-knit circle. I'll say that. And I think initially kind of getting in and figuring out which conferences to apply to, which ones, because of course, as self-employed entrepreneurs, sometimes we are funding those trips ourselves. So just kind of learning the ropes, how to correctly write a proposal. What are some of the ways to make sure that you get what you're trying to teach across. Once you kind of break that or kind of get into that circle, it becomes kind of like riding a bike. You don't necessarily have to keep starting over again. But I think initially overcoming some of the self-doubt and thinking that, okay, the imposter syndrome can kind of kick in, like, oh my goodness. I remember the first time applying to speak at ISTE, I'm like, well, why would they listen to me? And look what happened. So I mean, I think it kind of getting over those first steps, those first time speaker jitters or first time applicant jitters. But now kind of looking back, I'm like thankful I did, because once you do, you realize just how supportive,
how powerful you are.
And that too. I mean, I'll take that. Definitely. I mean, again, just to that point, how many people are also there to help you realize that power and to affirm you. So that's important. That was a big part of my development, I think, as an entrepreneur, but even just as a person. So
everyone out there listening, we're all living for the first time. We're all learning what to do. We're all figuring it out. Even the people that hold the door open or close the door, they're also learning what to do. I have found that even today, I get some conferences that reach out to me and say, hey, we want you back because we got great feedback. And then we have some that say, thank you, but no thank you. Or, yeah, you can come, but you only got 30 minutes. And you still have to pay $400 for the registration and your travel.
Hello.
So I'm like, so it happens. It happens. Victor, you're doing a lot of work in schools around computer science. For educators who aren't sure about computer science and how it ties into education in K through 12, how would you break it down for them?
The easiest way to break it down for people who are not computer science people, I think, because again, we have to, part of that work is realizing that computer science was not always as equitable as it was, right? So hearing those words sometimes put that an automatic kind of, I wouldn't necessarily defensiveness, but just kind of like, oh, that's not for me. That's not for my kids or my classroom. But I think one of my go-tos is always to make sure that people understand it's the why, it's the tool behind computer science. So one thing that I've become more intentional about, especially with educators that are not necessarily don't have a background in computer science or technology, is to focus on computational thinking. The reality is that even when, and I think that it helps kind of explain the why in several situations, including the argument, well, with AI, why do kids still need to learn programming? Well, it's still that thought process. So we still have to figure out what problem do we want to solve? What are some of the steps we did? What matters? What doesn't? And so again, I think that also kind of relates to the core question of why do we need to be teaching computer science, or why do kids need this exposure if they don't want to code? I think a lot of it is helping people do a little bit of unlearning first, because the great part about lighting the flame was with the hour of code is that it made people aware that this existed, right? We needed to pay attention to who's learning computer science, who's not, why they aren't, what kind of equity issues that or creates. Also, I think it kind of did a disservice because people latched on to the verb coding. And so it's like, well, my kids don't need to learn. I'm an ELA teacher. My kids don't need to learn how to build a robot, or my kids don't need to learn how to play or create a video game. Well, they do need to learn how to, even in writing an essay, right? Abstraction. So again, you have this plethora of information. How do you take out what's important and what's not? And then again, of course, there's definitely algorithmic flow to writing. I think you have to give educators those particular steps. And so we have to almost take out, and when I present in conferences that are not computer science related, that's one of the first things I do is kind of set that tone in the room. I'm not necessarily here to talk to you about coding. And I've even in kind of structuring my workshop, making sure that even if I pull up a screenshot of Scratch, that's done afterwards, because I want people to know that the skill behind coding, right? Why we teach it is that it permeates all subject areas, because you want kids to have this tool, this computational thinking tool, to be able to attack problems, to complete a task, write an essay. And that to me is fundamental in all areas of education. So I think it's helping kind of understanding the why and not necessarily just the how, if that makes sense.
I love what you said about even in writing, you are using algorithms. Now, my love and study of computer science began in college, where I majored in a subject called Management Information Systems, which is a mix of computer science and business. For the audience, I graduated in 2001. In that program, I did learn about business. I learned about marketing and accounting, which has helped me a lot today. But I also learned about coding, artificial intelligence, and information technology. And I want to take it back to what Vic just said. In college, I remember very early on working on a project that involved me developing algorithms. We were writing pseudocode before we were coding, and it struck me to how similar it was to developing a recipe or a step-by-step instructions of doing something. And that's when I knew I was hooked. We didn't call it computational thinking, but we did those 4 things. And I've realized that this is the way or a way to solve computational problems, whether you're dealing with coding, hardware, artificial intelligence. I would say that learning how to develop algorithms and step-by-steps made me passionate about the subject. It made me passionate about learning and how to find ways of doing things, but it laid the foundation for my career, because I eventually wanted to become a great teacher. And that's what I did by following steps, following algorithms. So that's fantastic.
It's definitely a life skill. And I think, like I said, making that evident for people who don't necessarily have that background, I think it gives more perspective as to why that's important, and how it could even be taught in various subject areas.
Now for a word from one of our sponsors. If you're a STEM and PBL teacher like me, you're always on the lookout for new project ideas and resources. You know George does PBL, and I'm telling you, look no further than SmartLab. SmartLab really has a fresh take on STEM and PBL. I'm proud to be a partner, and they sponsor the podcast. But just don't take my word for it. Check out what other educators are saying about SmartLab.
When students enter into SmartLab, they are allowed to think outside of traditional norms.
It gives them a lot of agency. They feel empowered and important. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of the SmartLab environment and the way the project process is set up.
SmartLab becomes this place where they can do those things and have the time and space to communicate better and even deal with social emotional stuff. They're having a bad day. A SmartLab's a place where we can change the pace of what they're learning to match their mental needs for the day. And that comes back tenfold later on when they want to be there and they want to learn and they want to do stuff and they feel safe and they feel like they can get the things they need.
That's one of the big benefits of being in more of a collaborative environment, is it makes you have to work. It makes you have to be accountable.
Please look in this episode's show notes for a link to connect with SmartLab. And tell us about any upcoming projects, such as a book or conferences you'll be speaking at well into 2025.
I have coming up most recently, I have headed to Boston this weekend for the Black Boy Joy Summit. This is the second year of this project. Group of dynamic gentlemen out of Roxbury, Massachusetts. I should be in Roxbury, but I'm doing there's like 6 different tracks. The target audience is Black and brown boys between the ages of 14 and 24. So, Coach, I'll be holding down the STEM track. We'll be doing a Code the Block mobile app design workshop where the kids will be working a little bit on coding, but again, focusing more on how we can use computational thinking and how that can lead to entrepreneurship. That's one thing I'm huge, especially when we're talking to Black and brown kids about how those things connect. After that, I have a conference in our GAETC, so our hometown conference in Atlanta. That's been one I've been attending since becoming a computer science teacher, very instrumental in helping me connect to the Georgia community or tech learning community. So I always like to go back and again, speak at that when I can. And yeah, just whatever comes up next. We have our fall classes starting as far as student facing. Those will be starting in the middle of this month. So we have parents, if anybody is interested, our classes are virtual. So we do have some tech classes. We have some Black history classes that'll be starting to address some of the concerns of parents who are in states where they may or may not be able to get that access to Black history. So excited to kick off those inaugural courses we have high school levels class and also middle and elementary school. And yeah, just applying. I can't believe we're already applying again for ISTE. The computer science teachers, CSTA just elected our next equity fellowship. So excited to step into the shoes of an alum and be working with them and leading them through some of their work for this year. So 2025 is already pretty busy, and busy is good. So we are very thankful for those opportunities. We hope to get to some, my goal this year also is to get it to some conferences where we haven't been yet. So to hit some states where, of course, we've done a lot in Georgia. We've done a lot in Texas with our partnership with MadLearn, here in Chicago also. Yeah, looking to challenge ourselves to hit some states that we haven't quite seen yet.
That's fantastic, Victor. I want to say congratulations for all your work and everything you're doing, and Coding with Culture just blowing up everywhere. So congratulations. What a perfect way to end the show. Victor, how can people find you so they can book you to speak at their conference, school, or event?
Absolutely. Well, all things are Coding with Culture. So our website, www.codingwithculture.com. All of our social channels. I am very organic business owner. I am interacting with folks. So again, if you see us on LinkedIn, again, all those tags on those are Coding with Culture, except Twitter. We ran out of characters, so it's Coding W Culture. But again, I man all of those. Would love hearing from teachers or families that are looking to either bring computational thinking into their classroom, expose their kids to it. Just looking forward to helping more people and bridge that digital divide. The more we get the technology comes into the world, the more important that equity issue comes. So we hope to continue to work hard and keep on doing what we're doing.
I will be sure to put a link on how to book Victor in the show notes and all over social media. That's it for this episode. Until next time, this is the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast. Whether you're a teacher or administrator, you lead by walking alongside your students and your staff. You teach them what to do. You model for them. Let's say you're in a situation where you don't know what to do and you bring in a coach or a resource, you learn alongside them. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, the second thing is this. Give your people feedback, not pushback. Whoever you push back on, whether physically or verbally, they're going to do it right back immediately. And if they're intimidated by our position, our status, they're going to do it behind our backs and ruin our programs. My guy. I want to leave you on this note. Trajectories can be changed. When I was in 10th grade, here's a snapshot of who I was in 10th grade. There's a rapper named Rakim. I'm not sure if you guys know about Rakim, but he used to say, it's not where you're from, it's where you at. And I played that on my headphones at 16 years old every day until I believed it. And I'm showing you this because I'm seeing versions of this throughout American schools. This is your reality of what you have to face. If I can do it, any kid can do it, but they have to work hard. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast with Jorge Valenzuela.